Hi guys, and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're going to make chocolate chip walnut scones. So to start out with this recipe, we are going to use 1 cup of unsalted butter, and you want it to be very, very cold, and we're going to dice that up. Now this butter isn't probably as cold as what I would liked it to have been because I took it out of the refrigerator and we had to run outside and chase all the chickens who got out because the door wasn't latched. So it's cutting a little bit easier than what it will most likely cut if it's very cold, but I'm just going to go ahead and dice this up. And you're going to notice that today I'm doing a voiceover with my cooking video, and that's because life sometimes is very hectic, and in a busy house with 4 kids and a husband, sometimes there is a lot of commotion and there's just not a lot I can do about it. So we're going to try it this way today and see what you guys think about it. So make sure you leave in the comments down below if you like this format and if you would like to see me do it again. So here I'm just dicing up this butter, and we're going to get that into the bowl of the KitchenAid mixer. This recipe originally came from Farmhouse on Boone, and I have altered it a little bit, so I will leave the recipe in the comments down below. So now I'm going to go ahead and get 3 3/4 cup of flour, and I keep my flour right underneath where I bake because it just makes it so much easier when I can just reach down and get my flour, because I keep my flour in 50-pound bags or 25-pound bags, and I don't always want to be lifting that up, so I just keep it right down there right below us. So you're taking that really cold butter and you're going to add your flour. And then we're also going to add to this 1/4 cup of sugar and 2 tablespoons of baking powder. Now, you see my baking powder there. I get that from the Amish community, and so it comes in bulk in these little bags like that. And that's a 2 tablespoon measure, so I don't have to do it twice. It saves me 1 spoonful. That's my salt there, and we're adding 2 teaspoons of salt. The original recipe calls for 3. I don't like my scones super salty, so I opt for 2 there. And there's that pre-measured 1/4 cup of sugar. So we're going to turn this on, and the trick to good scones is not over mixing. So you want the butter super cold so that it stays chunky. So there goes the butter. And we're just going to mix it a little bit. You don't want to mix it more than when your butter gets to like a pea-sized consistency. The key is to just... Okay, so while that's mixing, I am going to go ahead and pour myself 1 cup of cold milk. Now, of course, this is our raw goat's milk, but you can use any milk that you want. You could even use like a coconut milk if you wanted to. That would add a nice flavor to it. You could use heavy cream as well. That's what the original recipe calls for, but we're going to go ahead with our whole milk because it already has cream in it. I am adding a teaspoon of vanilla. The original recipe does not call for this, but hey, I mean, who can argue with an extra flavor addition, right? Just give something to the chocolate flavor. So in goes that cup of cold milk. And now we have to add 4 large eggs. So here I have 2 turkey eggs, which are probably extra large. And I also have 2 of our smaller chicken eggs. So that will kind of balance each other out. Now, as you can see, I have the mixer on low, and I am cracking the eggs into a bowl. And the reason why I do this is because if I had a bad egg, which these are all fresh, I collect them daily, so these are all good to go. But if I had a bad egg, I would rather it go into this bowl than into the bowl of the KitchenAid where I have all of my other ingredients already. So in those 4 eggs go, and I'm going to turn it up just a little bit to try to pull some of that up off the sides. And I'm getting ready because this is the most important addition. I have my sourdough starter here, and I'm taking a look at my sourdough, and I realized that it kind of has like it's dried over the top because it's been a few days since I've fed her. So I am just over here. I have a little compost bowl that I keep in my kitchen. So if I have food scraps, I just put it in that bowl, and then I'll take it out and put it in a bucket, which I will eventually take to the chickens. So that's what you see me doing right there. I'm taking that dried top layer of my sourdough that's been neglected off. The sourdough underneath is perfectly fine, so we're not going to worry about that at all. There was no gross mold or anything like that. It's perfectly fine. It just had like a dried layer. Anyhow, we're doing a half a cup of sourdough starter, and I'm getting really low with my starter, so I'm going to go ahead and feed it after this. You'll probably see me do that further along in the video. The cool thing about sourdough starter is you just really need a tiny little bit to get it going. So I have more than enough left in my jar to feed it and, be able to use it as a loaf of bread or whatnot later on, maybe over the weekend. But we're going to go ahead and put this sourdough starter into the bowl. And I'm going to make sure also to kind of scrape down the sides of this mixing bowl because I want everything to be incorporated without having to turn the speed up very high. We don't want the speed super high. We don't want to mix it super long. We want those chunks of butter in there to really give the scone its signature texture and consistency. So I'm doing as much as I can to keep this from becoming a consistent mixture. We want it to kind of be lumpy. You want to see chunks of butter in there. You don't want it to be smooth like a pancake batter or cookie batter. You want it to kind of be lumpy. You don't want there to be any dry flour in there either, but you want to make sure that those chunks of butter remain. So that's the whole point of putting it in there super cold. And that's just when you bake it up, it's just going to have this tender consistency, very flaky, and just absolutely delightful. So while that's mixing, I'm going to go ahead and do a rough chop on my walnuts. Now, sometimes I have an antique nut crusher, one of those ones. It's like a little glass jar. It has the little spring on top. It's like a plunger action, and you just go ahead and chop them up like that. But for these scones, they're kind of rustic, and I prefer my walnuts to kind of be roughly chopped instead of very finely chopped because I like the texture and the consistency of a little bit bigger pieces. So I'm just going ahead with the knife and giving it a rough chop. We're going to toss that in there. That is 1 cup of black walnuts that we are putting in there right now. And I do love walnuts. Now, her original recipe did not call for walnuts, but I just really love the way walnuts and chocolate go together. I feel like it's a perfect pairing. So here I am just going to go ahead and put that in there. I also have a cup of semi-sweet chocolate chips as well that I will add to this. Now, you could use any additions that you wanted. Say you wanted to use dried cranberries. Maybe you want to put in there almonds. I think that would be a wonderful flavor profile as well. And if you were to go that route, instead of adding vanilla flavor, you might want to go ahead and add almond flavor. I think that would be lovely. Once you get the basis of something down, then you can really play with the flavors and create and make it your very own. You could also do a scone with blueberries, but if you're going to go ahead and do a fresh fruit or a frozen fruit, you need to be able to take into account for the juice that your fruit's going to give off. Now, you saw me there. I just added a little extra flour. Like I've said many times before, and I will always say, sometimes you have to really tweak it. If you have high humidity in your house, maybe it's going to take a little bit more flour to get the consistency and texture that you want. The texture that you want here is maybe just a little bit more firm than a chocolate chip cookie dough. You want to be able to roll it out and not have it be super sticky, but you don't want it so firm that it's like a pie crust. You want there to be a lot of softness to it. So I highly suggest starting with a good clean surface. And of course, when I bake, I make a huge mess. There was egg whites and everything else on here. So I'm just going to go ahead and clean this off before I get started and move everything out of my way. That way I don't knock stuff off the counter. And of course, I need to take a sip of my tea. This was a green tea and grapefruit mix, which is really lovely. So it's very important to stay hydrated while you're baking. So I'm getting my rolling pin and another spatula. I probably didn't need to dirty another spatula, but I really wasn't thinking when I put the one from the sourdough into the sink. But once it's in the sink, it's not coming back out until it's cleaned. So we're just going to go ahead and scrape down the paddle here. No good batter left behind. You can kind of get an idea for the texture too. Like I said, it's a bit like cookie dough, maybe just slightly firmer. And then we're going to go ahead and dump it out onto my nice clean countertop. Usually at this point, there are children hovering around me waiting for that mixing paddle and this bowl and this spatula. But they were at this point off doing other things and not paying attention to what I was doing. So in the sink that goes. And also, I've been trying to watch what I'm eating too, or else I'd probably be sneaking a taste of that also. I've said before, and I'll say it again, and it's a hill I'll die on, but the raw eggs and cookie dough is just fine. As long as you aren't having rotten eggs, I think you'll live. Of course, it's personal preference, but I grew up eating raw cookie dough, and I think I turned out okay. So yeah, just really flour your surface very well at this point because this is kind of sticky. You can see it's not like a bread dough. But we're going to put it on there, making sure that surface is floured really, really well. And make sure you scrape that bowl down because you don't want to leave any of that good stuff behind. Again, showing great personal restraint not to be licking that dough off there. All right, so I'm gonna flour the top of this as well, just because it still is a bit stickier than what I'd like. I'm gonna kind of get it started in the right direction. Now we're gonna roll this out so that it's about an inch thick. It's kind of along the lines of making biscuits. If you've ever made biscuits, you know, that same kind of dough consistency, the same idea, except these aren't gonna rise like, a biscuit dough is gonna rise. But we're just gonna go ahead and roll this out just a wee bit. And I gotta find my scone cutter. Harley made me a scone cutter a few months ago, probably in October or November. She has a 3D printer and she was able to make me a scone cutter. And I just love this one. Usually you see scones in a triangle shape, which I love that. And I can cut them into that. But if you want like a consistent size and shape across the board, you need a cutter. And she made me this really pretty circle one. It has scalloped edges. And there I am trying to figure out where I put it. But it's in my bag there. I keep all my measuring cups and measuring spoons and everything in a Ziploc bag. And this bag, of course, has been it's been through it. There it is. There's my cute cutter. But this bag's been through it. I should probably upgrade it by now. But it's so much easier when you're baking as much as I am to just have everything in one little baggie. Then I can pull it out and I know I have all my measuring cups. Rather than having to rake through a drawer and try to find everything, it's just all in one place. So those are my cookie sheets and they're lined with parchment paper. So they're ready to go already. And I'm going to go ahead and cut. Now I know it's right out of the frame, but you'll see me cut the rest. I flour it in my little cup measure with flour. I put a little flour on there so that the dough doesn't stick to the cutter. And basically you just push it down, give it a little jiggle, and then you should be able to pick it up. And I'm just going to go along here and get them all cut out. Flouring every couple, that way we're sure not to stick to the cutter. I really love this cutter because first it has a really whimsical shape, but also it's the cutter itself is very thin walled, so it just cuts through the dough really, really nicely. It's actually cutting through the walnuts too, so it's really nice. It's almost as good as a metal one. I always like the metal better than the plastic because some of the plastic ones are just so thick. They don't cut very nice, but this one cuts really, really nicely. She's made me quite a few different things before. I have biscuit cutter, and I can't remember. Oh, I had her make me one for my turnovers too, my popovers. So it's really, really neat when you have those 3D printers, all the different things that you can make with it. Comes in really handy for the kitchen, that's for sure. So you'll see as I'm going along here, I'm taking the little pieces because obviously, I mean, this is a circle and there's going to be extra, and I'm just kind of putting it in a pile, and we're going to use every last bit of this dough. I'm not going to waste a single bit of it. And I'm going along. Now, some of it in the middle there was still sticking to the counter, and that's because there wasn't enough flour maybe. But that's not a problem. I just kind of leave them there, and after I get it all the rest of it cut, I'm going to come back with my bench scraper and just pick them up off the counter with the bench scraper. This recipe made, I'm trying to think, 28 scones. So it's a pretty good size recipe. This cutter, I think, is just shy of 3 inches across too, so it's not super big, but it is absolutely perfect with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. It's the perfect snack. Out they come. And we're just going to go ahead and get the rest of this all mixed together. I'm going to put those on the cookie sheets, and then I will come back and re-roll those all out. So I definitely think that scones are a great snack for the kids. My children are all older. I mean, my youngest one is going to be 13 April 9th. So, I mean, I really don't have little kids anymore, but my children all started drinking coffee at a young age, just like I did. My youngest two children they don't drink sodas, they don't drink Kool-Aid, they don't drink any sugary beverages, nothing like that, but they do really enjoy having a cup of coffee with a little bit of milk or cream in it. And so they really like stuff, snacks that they can eat with their coffee. And scones are just a perfect treat. They're not overly sweet, they have a really nice texture, and we really like them in this house. So there I am with a bench scraper getting those ones that were a little bit stuck, and onto the cookie sheet they go. So I'm just going to take this, and when you are making cookies or rolling out pie crust, anything like that, when you have the excess and you're going to re-roll it out, it's very important not to overwork it because that dough will get very tough. So these ones usually aren't nearly as pretty as your original ones are, but they will taste just as good and have just as good of a texture if you are very, very gentle with your dough. So I'm just going to roll it out a little wee bit, and we're going to cut the rest out of this. I figure if you're going to make a recipe and you're going to spend the money on the ingredients, you might as well get the biggest bang for your buck. So none of this goes behind. When I make pie crusts, I don't get rid of any of my extra pie crust. I usually err on the side of too much because that way I can roll out the remaining bits of pie crust, and I usually then will butter it and add sugar and cinnamon, and it's a really great snack. I remember doing that with my Grammy when I was little, and I used to love having those little bites of pie crust with sugar and cinnamon. And now I do it for my family, and they also love it very much. So it always tickles me when I can keep a tradition going along. And I think that that's probably a pretty common tradition for people that make pie, is to use that pie crust and make little tiny cinnamon rolls out of it. But here I am, still trying to work down the rest of this dough very gently, and I will eventually just get to the point where I kind of just make the shape with my hand. I think this is probably the last one I'm going to use the cutter with. And then I'm just going to wing it with the last bit of the dough. That's the ugly one, but that's okay. It's a little on the bigger side, so it'll probably get claimed first because it's a bit bigger. There, just real rough. Yep. I was going to use the cutter, and I said, you know what? It's not worth it. We'll just make a shape with my hand, and on we go. So these are going to go into a 400-degree oven, and I'm going to bake mine in my oven for about 20 minutes. That's going to be about perfect. But you could go 22 minutes if you have to, or even a little longer. In my particular oven, I have a double oven, and it bakes a little unevenly, in my opinion. You just have to kind of get used to how your ovens bake. So I know for me in my oven that half the time, when it's 10 minutes in, I'm going to have to switch. So, and that's good practice no matter what your oven cooks like, is just to switch things. So what's on the top will be moved to the bottom. What's on the bottom will be moved to the top. That way you can try to get an even golden brown consistency the whole way through. So let me get everything into the oven. Having a double oven was really a game changer, and ever since I had a double oven for the first time, I don't think I can ever go back. And actually, I have 3 ovens in my kitchen now. I have the double oven over here, and then you can see a little bit to the right, I have a cooktop there. And then further to the right, I convinced my husband to put me in a regular stove with a cooktop and an oven in it. That is mainly for my canning because it doesn't have any counters above it, just shelves. So I have enough room for my canning, my pressure canner, because they can be quite tall. So I have the 3 ovens, and I really don't ever use the other oven unless it's a holiday, and then I employ all 3 of them. Otherwise, I kind of have, everybody has a favorite. But using the bench scraper is really, it makes it so easy to get that flour off the counter, especially with a wood counter, because things can get a little sticky and try to stick in the pores of the wood there. So I like having my bench scraper, and I feel like all I ever get done doing is cleaning up. Does anybody else, feel like that too? I'm constantly cooking. I'm constantly cleaning the kitchen because it's just the most used part of our house. And, the funny thing is we took out the dishwasher. You can see to the lower right of the sink there. That's where the dishwasher used to live. But I hated that dishwasher. I hated all of my dishwashers. We've had several of them, and I hated all of them. So I went ahead and took it out, even though Jeff protested greatly. And took it out, and I used it for storage for my cutting boards, all my cookbooks you can see down below, and my dehydrator, because my dehydrator used to sit on top of a freezer, and every time I wanted to get food out of that freezer, I had to move the dehydrator, I had to move everything off of it, and it was just really a pain in the butt. So this is a much better use of space. And there you can see the chaos that I was talking about. Chase came in from bouncing on the trampoline and just booked it across. So that is the chaos, but that's okay. And I think that eventually someday I'm going to miss this chaos when it's no longer here. But for right now, I'm enjoying it very much. And I'm going to go throw away my garbage Oh, you can see Rooker's tail. He's wagging his tail. He's never very far from my side, that little dog is. Now, I said you were going to see me feed my sourdough starter, and that's exactly what I'm going to do right now. My sourdough starter, you know, it deserves an award because it really is a champ. I mean, I neglect it quite a bit. I used to keep my sourdough starter in the refrigerator, and that's a really great thing to do if you know that you're not going to be consistent with feeding it. I've tried really, really hard to keep up with it, and I usually do, but the thing is, sometimes I can't bake with it that day. And I hate to just waste the sourdough starter, so I will like not feed it until I know that I can use the discard. So one of these days I will go ahead and do a sourdough starter tutorial for you guys, but right now when I feed mine, I use a cup of flour and 2/3 cup warm water. Now I'm taking my water out of the tap, but I have a well, so if you're using city water, I would recommend you use like a bottled water or something like that to put in your sourdough starter. Don't use city water. Don't use city water for anything, actually. Just bypass that altogether unless it's like washing clothes or taking a shower. Don't cook with it and don't drink it. That's just my personal opinion, but I will die on that hill. Anyways, I'm scraping down the sides right now and just making sure that all my flour is hydrated. And there was just the tiniest little bit of sourdough in there, but this thing will be bubbly and happy in no time. It always amazes me that sourdough starters are literally just flour and water, and they can create some of the most magical loaves of bread. I'm so glad that there is such a resurgence in women and men using sourdough in their kitchens, because I think it's just a wonderful resource. And it's so good for your stomach too. Now, with my flour, I use just a general all-purpose flour. I prefer to use unbleached flour. If all you have is a regular bleached flour, go ahead and use that. There's nothing wrong with that. You could also use a whole wheat flour, a freshly milled flour. You can use einkorn or any other type that you want. It will all work just fine. All right, guys, here's the moment. Are you ready to see them? They are fresh out of the oven, still nice and warm. There goes Caleb, my eldest. But check out the texture and consistency of these beautiful scones. I told Caleb he had to get himself a cup of coffee before he tried them. There I am with my cold brew that Harley made for me. She gets the goat's milk and she shakes it in a jar and makes like a cold foam. It's absolutely perfect. Guys, go try this recipe. You're going to love it. See you next time.